Good morning. Good morning. We're Committee of the Whole is now back in session. I'd like to again welcome back the Guam Election Commission for being here and the senators who are here this morning. We've went through all 19 chapters the past few days, and now we are going back to the sections that were bookmarked, and we're also going to dispose of several amendments that we have before us. First amendment, there's two amendments by the Vice Speaker. Vice Speaker? But yours is, you have one more? Okay, I'm sorry, Vice Speaker. Speaker 1, Pat, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the amendment I have is for sections 11118. And what it is what it says is that, of course, as soon as all votes are counted and the ballots are sealed, the election commission shall certify the results of the election. And the language that I want to put here is provided that the Guam Election Commission shall not certify election results until the GEC makes a determination on all election complaints or causes for contests brought to the attention of GEC within 15 days of the election. Now, yesterday we had all this discussion in terms of sometimes like what is the rush to go in and then start to certify, and yet there are some of these pending complaints. And I'm not talking just about administrative type of concerns, but there are just a whole slew of problems that we've heard that has happened election after election. So, and since these are for the, and I'm just talking about the general election, I'm not talking about the primary, this is for the general, because we still have that, time frame right after the general election before actually the swearing in of anyone in January. So therefore, they have that time. I'm not saying the full 30 days or 45 days. It's, we hope that they would be able in 15 days to be able then to resolve some of those issues, some of those complaints and concerns. So that's what this amendment is calling for.
Thank you, Speaker 1, Pat. Is there any discussion? Senator Blas, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the explanation by good speaker. However, I'm trying to look this. Is this section specific to the general election? I'm just trying to find that here, but I guess my concern was primarily with the primary and the effect that it may have, on the primary. Yesterday we had again the last 2 days discussion with regards to all the mechanisms that need to go in place between the primary and the general. And to do this, and it construed, and this is also has to be followed in the primary. There is going to be an issue. I appreciate the take on the commission themselves, members themselves, or the executive director with regards to what this amendment proposes, and your thoughts on this amendment.
Sidus Masi, Senator Blas. I think it doesn't specify here that it's the general election.
Yeah, that's what
I may have problems if I have to do it in the primary election.
And then that's why I wanted to. I was looking. I got through all the discussions. I got all of my pages mixed up here, and my concern is the effect that it would have if on the primary if it's not specific to, the language is not specific to the general election. Um, and what this basically provides, now let's just go under the assumption that this is just for the general. And the 15 days here, this would basically mean that, let's take for example this year's election. This year's election, the general is going to be held on, do you remember what day was it? Was it the 2nd?
November 6th.
November 6th. Okay, so 15 days from November 6th. Well, and maybe the question is to the mover of the amendment with regards to the 15 days. Is this 15 calendar, 15 work days? And Mr. Chair, that's my
Speaker, would
question.
you yield to that?
Well, it says 15 days.
I guess I got my answer. So it's 15 calendar days. I think we need to
I
deal
mean,
with
if you feel
with the
that,
first concern.
15 days, you want to put 15 working days. You know.
No, well, but before we get to that, it's basically going back to, is this chapter that it's going to be put in, is this specific to the general election?
Well, that's what I said. It's for the general election when the final results come in before the certification, before swearing in, and it's in Chapter 11, which is on vote tabulations and declaration of results. And I know that when you look, okay, so maybe the question, the question to ask then is the commission members is that on this specific section where it says certification of election, do you consider this to be then for both the primary and general election?
Yes, Speaker.
Okay, so then what I would like then here then is that my intent, of course, is to make sure that that it be for the general election. It's not meant for the primary, because I know in the primary you have 60 days. 10 days already is going to be used to be able to tabulate all of the votes that are coming in, absentee ballots coming in, and then of course you have before you print and send out the ballots, leaves you up to, I mean, could be 50 days, but as soon as they start coming in doesn't mean you won't stop tabulating. So that's the reason why I want this to be reflected only in the general election.
Along those lines, Mr. Chair, and I can see what the good lady from Malolo is trying to do is trying to accomplish here. I'm just concerned that if we change the way the language is written here, because it is for any election, and this is just under the assumption with regards to, we're just talking primary in general, there may be special elections that fall under this thing too as well. If in fact that's what the intent is, and so that we can separate it, I don't know whether it's best that then we make this a subsection of another section of this subsection. Because if we were to change that language, then you would look to see the construction of this would just be primarily, would be just for the general. Then you have no, then there would be no section with regards to certification of any other election. So this may be something that would be maybe like a subsection of the subsection or a subsection of the section here. Because I'm looking at the 1118 as it stands right now, and the construction of this amendment here. And if we're going to put that language to make it specific, then this whole section is just going to be just about the general election. You have no provision here for certification of any other election. Again, it's not to object to what she wants to do. I can see what and the reason why she wants to do this is just in the construction of this. It's going to affect, and it's going to change this whole section into specifically the general. Then you have no section to govern the primary or special election.
To proffer an amendment then, like you were suggesting, that there be a subsection keeping the same language as it is, but adding that in a general election, maybe that's the language, in a general election, the Guam Election Commission shall not certify election results until GEC makes a determination on all election complaints or causes for contest brought to the attention of GEC within 15 days of the election.
Well, Mr. Chair, even if you were to construct it that way, just the general election, then what happens to special election?
Mr. Chairman,
Huh?
I mean, because the way the language is, even right now, when it says it's applicable to both, you go down further to section 12-102, and it has causes for a contest. And this causes for a contest, of course, is in the general election, because that's the time that's the most critical, is who then will be in office. And that's why then, what I'm saying, without listing all the causes, all the reasons in which then there could be a contest, I'm saying is that go through all those, vet all those, resolve all those then before you certify. Because that to me is the most critical, that when the time comes, when you're going to swear them in already, it's a done deal. And I think that's what we've been seeing time after time, election after every election, that somehow, because a lot of these contests or complaints have never been vetted and resolved at a reasonable time, and that then already the certification is done. And that's then is what I'm trying to do. So if the language, to keep the language, the certification of the election on 11118, that will definitely address the primary, then what this language then is saying, that, to just then, I guess, withdraw that, my amendment, and instead put this one in, that in a general election then, that this is what GEC should not certify until this complaints or causes for a contest are resolved within 15 days.
Okay, so Speaker, so your first amendment you're withdrawing,
Yes.
and then you are,
And hopefully that would address then the concerns of, my other colleague from Barragata.
okay, and also, Speaker, since we've withdrawn your initial amendment and you are proffering this one, I'd like to just also clarify on section 1118, the final sentence there, the final certification shall be signed by
Yes.
majority of the commission.
You're right.
Is your intention to keep that on?
Yes, and to keep that on. Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
wrote
we
it
need to
down
add
here.
that.
Yes, and to add that last sentence.
Okay. On the amendment, we have the chair of the commission would like to.
Motion to, first, there's a motion to withdraw.
Okay. Okay, on the initial motion to withdraw, any objections? To withdraw. To withdraw the First Amendment. Any objections? No objections. Carries. Now, on the amendment now to place what she just read on that amendment. Okay, Speaker, can we have the Speaker? Yes. Speaker, can you please restate?
So the new amendment will be, in a general election, that's what I'm going to say. In a general election, the Guam Election Commission shall not certify election results until the GEC makes a determination on all election complaints or causes for contest brought to the attention of GEC within 15 days of the election. The final certification shall be signed by a majority of the commission.
Thank you, Speaker. On the amendment, Senator Blas?
I think this helps to satisfy one of my concerns with regards to making sure that this is not something that's for the primary, but and recognizing too the chapter also or the title also contains chapters with regards to the Chamorro registry and the Chamorro vote, and then also I'm sure that this chapter also deals with special elections. Okay, so maybe we can add that in a general or special election.
Okay, you want to make the amendment to the amendment, Senator?
Yes,
Okay. In a general or
special election.
special election.
Runoff too? In a general, special election, or runoff election.
Maybe that's a better. Or can we, if it's okay, we can put in any other election except the primary, just to make sure we,
That's
if
fine.
that's a,
Yeah, that actually helps there. But along those lines too, and I noticed that we put that statement of the final certification shall be signed by majority of the commission. I want that also because that was the original language is maybe for context and everything. Keep that language there in the top, then make the rest a subsection to it, because then that provision of the final certification shall be signed by the majority of the commission only pertains to all other elections other than the primary.
okay, so on your first amendment to the amendment, to add the, in a general election and in any other election,
Why don't we just say in any other election other than the primary?
okay, another election. On the amendment to the amendment,
No problem.
no objections? Motion carries. Did you want to move? You
Well,
said,
can I have just I just want to speak to so that
okay,
I
we'll
know
be in
she knows where
short.
I'm going and she
short
doesn't think
recess.
that I'm trying to
Okay. So Speaker, you would withdraw your first one and just, okay. The Committee of the Whole is now back on. Speaker Wonpat, you recognize?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make another motion then to withdraw the second amendment, and I have a cleaner version now, then everybody should have the
Okay.
cleaner version of the copy.
On the motion to withdraw, no objections? Okay,
So
thank you.
the new amendment that I'd like to proffer reads that in every election except the primary election, the Guam Election Commission shall not certify election results until the GEC makes a determination on all election complaints or causes for contest brought to the attention of GEC within 15 calendar days of the election. Therefore, as soon as all the votes are counted and the ballots are sealed, the Election Commission shall certify the results of the election. The final certification and the seal on the ballot envelopes shall be signed by a majority of the Commission.
Thank you, Speaker. On the amendment, no objections? Motion carries. Thank you, Speaker. Vice Speaker Cruz, you're recognized for your amendment.
Mr. Chairman, if I could go backwards and do the shorter amendment first.
Yes, please. Proceed.
I was dismayed the other day to hear that the Attorney General has not responded to the Election Commission since the transmission in January, I believe. And so my first amendment is to add a new section, and I'll have the legal counsel give it whatever correct number it is towards the end of the bill, requiring that the Attorney General shall, within 30 calendar days from enactment, transmit or cause to be transmitted to the Speaker of Legislature a status report detailing the actions taken to resolve the administrative complaints submitted to his office by the Guam Election Commission. And I'm trying to find the date now that that was sent. It was January 13 that it was sent by the current executive director, January 13th. And as I understand it, since then, there hasn't been a response or any feedback.
No, there hasn't been.
And it's been 60 days now, Mr. Chairman, and I really think that's unconscionable when a commission of the government submits some fairly or at least allegations of egregious concerns, and nothing is taken. I'd like to make sure that there is a response. All right. So that's my first amendment.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. On the First Amendment, any discussion? No objections? Motion carries.
My second amendment, Mr. Chairman, is expansion of the legislative intent. It's a two-page amendment. And that's my second amendment. It just lists what we've been discussing over the last 5 days.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Speaker. On the amendment, are there any discussion? Speaker Wonpat?
I have a question because this is being codified, of course, and I'm wondering is it appropriate to actually list names of individuals in the law now, or?
Vice
I don't know
Speaker,
who can answer that question. Maybe the
would you like
mover
to
of the
yield?
amendment.
This is in the legislative intent. I would have no problems with removing the names of the commissioners that were the subcommittee chairs.
So, yeah.
And so I'll make the motion to
Okay.
delete the names.
Okay, on the motion to delete the names, no objection, motion carries. On the main amendment, any discussion? Are there any objections? No objection, motion carries. Senator Gutherts, you recognize?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you know, yesterday we had a discussion on how to handle the independent candidates that may file for candidacy for this particular election and any future elections. And Senator Chris brought up a lot of good points, and we sort of ended that discussion by agreeing to develop an amendment that would accommodate the independent candidates. So I took the opportunity to design an amendment, and that is, everyone should have a copy of it. And basically this would add the following language to section 15301 in the bill. I'm going to make just one word change as we go through it, so I'd like to read this to you if I may. If there are qualified candidates who are not members of either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, the Guam Election Commission shall, please change the word may to shall reconfigure the ballot as necessary in order that candidates' names shall be placed on the ballot in 3 or more columns, with a separate column for each different recognized party and a separate column for those non-affiliated. The Guam Election Commission shall limit voters to mark their ballots in only one party or for non-affiliated candidates only for all offices in that primary election. So I think, Mr. Chairman, this will resolve the concerns that were expressed yesterday and provide for a vehicle to accommodate independent candidates for elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gutherts. Senator Tom Atta, you recognize on the amendment?
If the mover would yield and clarify a couple of questions. First of all, I understand from this then that the independent candidates are basically treated as partisan candidates, so that I cannot, let's say, vote for a Democratic 14 Democratic candidates and let's say one independent. Then that would be considered as a crossover.
Senator, would you yield?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The second question that I have is, I remember, I thought I read something in the statutes which there was a procedure as to who's on the left side if it was just you know, the two political parties. There's a way of determining who's going to be listed on the left side, who's going to be listed on the right side. So now if we get this independent candidate, how do we address, is he going to be on the far right, in the middle, or?
Well, as you can see from the proposed amendment, it authorizes the Guam Election Commission to reconfigure the ballot, and they would have to follow any existing law to guide them. If existing law, and I'd have to get clarification if it is existing law, but if existing law sets up a procedure for the party to the left and the party to the right, then I would assume the independent candidates would be listed in the middle, in the middle portion of the balloting. But I can't say for certain because I'm not a technician at the Guam Election Commission, but
Okay,
maybe we can ask the commission if they explain how they do it right now.
Thank you very much. And I think maybe I would like to maybe hear from the commission as to how they would handle for that eventuality where you have an independent, Republicans, and Democrats. Because I don't think the statute says anything about then where do you put that third third grouping? Or how you determine whether they are on the left, right, or the middle?
I'm looking for the section, but what has been the practice is usually the party that has the majority in the legislature would be on the left, and followed by the other party and the independent all the way to the right.
Okay, and is that clearly documented in the statute?
I need a second to go back. I'm not sure if it was changed. But the other challenge that we also would be faced with is, as you know, on the ballot itself, there are instructions and that are required. So it will, I guess, depending upon the number of candidates that do file, it usually presents a challenge for the commission.
Yeah, especially like in the primary. I think in the primary, the Democrats had like, what, 30 candidates? My gosh, if we're going to put 3 columns, you're going to have to list them down in about 10 font.
Mr. Chair. Plus, we might have to go to the back.
If I may, if you can take a look at your draft copy, sir, and if you, whatever page, and if you look at the upper corners or the upper fine print, that will probably be how big your print will be on the ballot if you do the 3 columns.
Yeah, that probably looks like about 12 font. Bigger than 12?
It's got very limited space.
Well, if they're using 11 by 16.
14.
14.
And the print size is mandated by law,
That's right. Yeah.
boldness and everything.
Yeah, I can see where it really probably won't be a problem in the general election, because we're talking about 15, and however many. But in the general, I mean in the primary, my gosh, when you got 30, that may require 2 columns. And the Republicans probably come out with 14.
I'll bring it up.
And, so you may need like 4 columns.
And Senator Ada, if I could have the commissioner explain, because now what this amendment would do is authorize them to reconfigure, and one of the possibilities would be, I was just asking if they can put instructions on the reverse. I don't know, and so we'll ask the commissioner to respond to that.
All right.
In the statute as it stands now, the instructions have to be printed on the top of the ballot. So it's feasible that we could print the instructions in larger font on the back of the ballot. That might be one way we could handle what's in code now. Because I think it'll give us some authority to revisit what's in code and reconfigure it so that it conforms to the standard of still being large enough for a lot of our residents to read, and also then allow for the space for an independent, if there is an independent candidate.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ada. On the amendment, is there any other discussion on the amendment? Senator Blas?
I can see with regards to, first off, we have a whole issue with regards to being able to fit 3 on one side. What is the current statute with regards to, isn't it supposed to be, no, but isn't the one party on one side of the ballot and the other party on the other side?
Right, that is the current statute now. The problem is in the event an independent files, that would create a problem.
Okay, but let's go with the statute.
If I might just add also to Senator Ada, not only will the senatorial be on, but you have the Washington delegate, you have the mayor and the vice mayors, okay? So that's really going to present a challenge.
Okay, so we need to then address current statute that says one party on one side of the ballot and the other party on the other side of the ballot. Don't we? Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, I mean, Mr. Carrillo?
I think that this amendment would allow us to then redesign the ballot to meet the qualifications. Right now, in the last election, the instructions were printed in the third column on the side in both English and Chamorro, which is required because they're both our official languages. I think this would give us the authority to redesign the ballot where we could, again, put all the candidates on the front side of the ballot and then instructions on the back. I think that would be the only way which we could meet what we need to do in code as far as the ballot. Have the instructions and all three candidates listed on the front side. But that would give us the authority, this amendment would give us the authority to do that, in my reading of the amendment. Can I just? But as it stands now, if there's no qualified independent candidate, then the ballots will be printed Democrats on the front, Republicans on the back, or whichever, one side and one side. It's not front or back. It's
That
just
doesn't matter. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Chris. We're not going to get into that. I'm not going to get stickers for that one.
Senator Blas?
Yes.
I think there's another commissioner who'd like to make a
Sure.
clarification.
Senator, if you reference 7114, current law. Current law says at the top of the ballot, there shall be printed an instruction to the voters.
Current law states,
Which won't allow the only instructions on the back. You'd have to change that.
so in order to be able to satisfy this, we're going to have to go to 7114 and deal with that too as well. Okay, now, I think, Mr. Chair, for me to continue my conversation, I need to see 7114 first. So, in order for me to continue my line of questioning, I may need to review 7114 first. Okay?
So we'll take a short break. Okay, we're back on the Committee of the Whole. Senator Blas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Mr. Chair, I guess what the issue that I have with the proposal here is we went through a whole exercise with wanting to find ways to be able to ensure that there wasn't any crossovers during the primary. I mean, that clearly was one of the issues. And one of the ways that this body had decided that there wasn't going to be crossovers is that you had one party on one side of the ballot, I mean, and the other party on the other side of the ballot. Now we're going back to putting everybody all on the same side. We're going to go back to square one with regards to the issue of crossovers. No matter how much you're going to explain to a person that you can't cross over if it's right in front of them, that's what they're going to do. And so, you know, it's I hate to say this, but we're taking a step backward here. Okay? And an issue with regards to, and there was a lot of concern with regards to the number of spoiled ballots because of crossovers in the primary. It's going to happen with this. And it's going to be compounded because now you're going to have an empty space in the middle. You're going to have, and it's just the psyche of individuals. All right? And you don't blame them. You don't blame them. A lot of times what they have a tendency to do is voting for their 15 best, the 15 people they like. Give them that opportunity and show them visually, despite what the language says, and despite the instructions I'm sure that people are going to get, that says you can only vote for a certain number of individuals, you know, on one column. That's not going to happen. How many times have we seen that in previous elections, and it still happened? This body addressed that issue earlier, in earlier legislation, which is now law, that basically says that you have parties on different sides of the paper. So I appreciate, and the discussion and being able, how are we going to be able to address, and you know, not to beat on a dead horse, but yesterday there was a whole discussion that we had, and I thought that was fruitful. That could have been resolved, this thing. This takes us back. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Senator Palacios?
Are we talking on now all the
On
issues?
the amendment?
No, I'm
No, okay.
I have actually a point of an inquiry, but on a different section.
Okay, so we'll get back to that. Senator Duenas and then Speaker Ben.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just think it's important to make it abundantly clear that a two-sided ballot does not create this issue. Because we compel and mandate that independents participate in a primary election, they must appear on a ballot when they qualify for elected office. That was what was discussed at length yesterday. So I just want to make sure that there's no spinning or no, discussion that a two-sided ballot causes this issue. It does not. The Guam Election Commission, the board, would be faced with the same issue, having to come up with a ballot with an independent candidate on that ballot in order to conduct the election under the current statute that we are maintaining in this body as we go through it. So I just wanted to make that abundantly clear in this body and to the listening public. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Speaker Ben?
All I know is we've had elections where we've had independent candidates, and we didn't have the requirements to put one party on one side and one party on the other side. The debate first started with this issue of putting all the candidates in the ballot is because we wanted to save money. I don't know if you recall, Joe, but we used to have the delegate separate. But we wanted to save money, so somebody said, put them on the same ballot because we were going to save $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Not even that, in additional paper stock. That was the first iteration of this change in the ballot structure because we wanted to save a little bit of money and so forth. Then the issue of the rights of the party and the lawsuits in the Supreme Court and the integrity of the primary races and who has the right to determine the nominee of its members And then that, again, presented an issue that we had to resolve with regards to participation of crossing over from one race to the other, because we used to be able to print it all and we just put the delegate ballot in a separate ballot. And that didn't have any crossovers, but it allowed then somebody to vote for a Democratic delegate and a Republican and legislature and a Republican governor. So when the lawsuit came out, they said, we've got to make sure that we instruct people once again. So we did that. And I'm just telling you this because, you know, I was here when all these discussions occurred, so I just have a little bit longer memory than most. And I'm just trying to avoid saying I'm older than most. I just have a longer memory. Joe has a little bit longer memory on the elections than I do. But that's because he's been there, both executive director and as well as a commission member for a good many years. So he has a lot of institutional knowledge of how the issues came about and why we made some of the changes. And then, so we went back to trying to avoid and present a ballot structure that didn't allow one to vote for a Democratic delegate and then go and cross over on the races that are on the separate ballot. And then we went and changed that, of course, so we solved that. Then the lawsuits came. And we even had a lawsuit here in the local Superior Court on the rights of the party and open primary, blanket primary, etc., in terms of how do we allow a primary that is conducted by the state. And we're not different than most states. Most states have primaries conducted by the local election commission. So this idea that only on Guam does the government or the local election board handle primary races, that's not really true. There are many jurisdictions across the country because the courts have ruled that the integrity of the election and having local election boards handle that is a compelling state interest to allow the government to spend money towards the party primaries. There's a compelling state interest. And so that's how we have been able to, or what has given us the policy of allowing the government to monitor, handle, and conduct the primary elections on behalf of the parties in the community because of that compelling state interest, as have been argued many times in many court cases. So it's not unusual that state governments, local jurisdictions spend government funds to assist the parties or to conduct the party primaries. So we went to the courts here because there was a complaint, and so the judge ordered the parties, you determine how you want to do it. Are you going to allow same-day registration as a Democrat to come in and vote for the Democrat? And both parties said, we don't even want a declaration. We're going to conduct an open primary for our party where you don't have to declare. You can just come up, they give you a ballot, and then you just mark your ballot when you're given a ballot, either Democrat or Republican, but you can only mark on one side. That still maintains the integrity of the process. And then we decide, then this last election, when we saw that the electorate had increased the crossover vote, then the solution came back of, well, let's print them on both sides. And that's why we're here back in this problem, looking at this issue again, because we've changed that from the previous election because we wanted to solve this one problem of the crossover votes. And are we disenfranchising and not counting those votes because of the fact that they violated the rights of the parties by participating in both election? That's what a crossover is. A crossover is participating in both primary elections. And we wanted to avoid that, and we all thought, not all of us, not all in this body thought that the solution to avoid that is printing them on both sides. I remember sitting here arguing that question, that's the solution is not that, because you compound the other issues that you have that we have to think about. So we're still searching for what is the best way to educate the voter about the process of the primary election, about casting for only one side, and so forth, at the same time allowing the process we have for putting in candidates who may not wish to be affiliated with either of the recognized party in their candidacy. So we're back to searching, how do we get the voter to ensure that they follow directions? That's really the biggest issue here, is to get that voter to understand that in the primary, he needs to stay on one side of the ballot, or one column of the ballot, should they all be on the same on one side. And so I'm not really sure that we are, that I think that this solution kind of takes us back to the old way, or we could go back to the separate ballot for one, so that you can print in bigger font and so forth. I think all of those are still fair game in regards to trying to find the best solution to conduct our elections in the system that we have now, with the process that we have, and to ensure that voters can cast their primary election vote correctly, in order to ensure that their full participation is allowed, by having them minimize the opportunity or minimize the likelihood of violating that and participating in both. So I think this kind of takes us back to allowing us to resolve that issue. We may have some challenges with regards to the size of the font and things like that, but I think those things are surmountable. And what is most important to us now, are we now looking at, maybe we should just have it, I mean, it could be easy, so that all your voting booths have a magnifying glass underneath, and you put it underneath, and you just kind of like, so even if the font's smaller, you can read it. I mean, we can look at some other way of allowing the general public to be able to read that ballot, if we think that if we put them all in 3 columns, it's going to do that, or if we put them all on the same side, we increase the chance of likelihood of voting on all. We just have to do a better job in terms of educating the voter on the purpose of the primary election, the process of it, and the requirements of casting a vote in that, so that we're able to count their vote because they do it correctly. And I'm not sure, I think the issue of the crossover ballot and that was highlighted because of all the problems, other issues that we've looked at with regards to what happened in this election. And those crossover ballots, had they been cast correctly, may have, because of the close nature of the election results, may have changed the outcome if those individuals had voted correctly. And that's why I think we focused a little bit on, man, that's too many votes, because somebody lost by 250 or 400 votes. And if the 4,000 or 3,500 were cast correctly, it could have gone, and it could have changed it. We weren't too concerned in the other times because they weren't that close. And even if everybody voted for that, in the spoiled ballots was given to one candidate, they wouldn't have won anyway. And so it didn't highlight those issues. But I think that the nature of the 2010 election, which is why we're discussing more of the 2010 election than we are of the election code itself, has brought that out to light and has kind of pushed us to find a solution to something that may not require what we're trying to do in these issues. So I just wanted to give my perspective on the issue, and just because my memory's a little longer than some of us here. So I want to thank you very much, Mr. Chair, on that issue. And I think this gives us enough leeway to be able to resolve some of those concerns with enhanced education, enhanced directions, enhanced instructions to the voter to minimize spoiling his vote by getting him to understand more fully the purpose of the primary election, the process of the primary election, and the responsibilities of the voter in that primary election. So thank you very much, and Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Ben. And that magnifying glasses thing, I think, is a brilliant idea. So we're checking with her, too. Yeah. Senator Palacios, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to share an observation in relation to the amendment, and I look at section 15108, page 139, which provide for the cancellation of the primary election if the number of candidates do not exceed or less than what is vacant for the position. And so I wonder, how does one judge if a candidate is an independent? What is the threshold when you decide not to hold a primary election for an independent candidate? Because if there are only 15 or less on the Republican side, then that party would not have a primary election, would it? According to section 105.
That
108.
section, Senator, yesterday, I believe we deleted it. So that was deleted.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I think I missed that point. So that's good. So then now, what the Gotthard's amendment then is relevant for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the Gotthard's amendment, there's been no objections, or did you object to it? Okay, so there is an objection. All those in favor of the Gotthard's amendment? One. On the Gotthard's amendment, this amendment that we just discussed, all those in favor? Okay, we'll read the amendment. This is on section 15301. If there are qualified candidates who are not members of either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, the Guam Election Commission shall reconfigure the ballot as necessary in order that candidates' names shall be placed on the ballot in 3 or more columns with a separate column for each different. Okay, let me just finish reading and then each different recognized party and a separate column for those non-affiliated. The Guam Election Commission shall limit voters to mark their ballots in only one party or for non-affiliated candidates only for all offices in that primary election. Okay, we'll take a short break. The committee of the whole is now back. The committee of the whole is now back on. On the Gotthard's amendment, On sections 15.301, there's been an objection, so all those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. We have the final amendment before us. Senator Duenas? Okay. Okay, we have some more coming. So Senator Duenas, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know why I'm so disorganized here on my desk. Let me grab somebody else's copy of it. But essentially, Mr. Chair, as we discussed yesterday, you know, this issue, and this could happen on either situation. I mean, it just probably in this coming election will happen such that there will be a hotly contested race on one side in the primary of the ballot. And but in future races, it could happen either way. And you know, just for equal protection, in terms of the minimum requirements for advancing on the ballot, I believe that the way this section is worded, 15.110, minimum vote required, we'll go through it real quickly here. No person shall be deemed nominated in a primary election unless the candidate receive votes at least 3 times greater than the required number of signatures needed for a nomination petition for candidacy for such election, or votes equal to 4% of the total number of persons who obtain ballots to vote in. And what I've done here is put that candidate's party, primary election, and deleted for all parties, whichever is less. And so, Mr. Chair, this basically just allows for a true primary conducted truly for selecting the party nominees to be allowed to use the ratio in that candidate's party. Because it could be envisioned that when you have a race that is heavily contested on one side, that other party then having to be held to the threshold of the votes cast in the entire election for that office is somewhat discriminatory in having to receive and achieve that level. And as a matter of fact, I even have a formula that I could show you, Mr. Chair, which shows in a situation where, you know, the greatest number and a really great number of votes are you know, and one of the other issues, Mr. Chair, with our primary, and this is widely known, and it's been discussed in heated elections before too, of shenanigans and running over and trying to participate in other parties. That's another issue that we have because of the way that we issue the ballot. And a primary election, and when there's not a hotly contested race, maybe on one side, there's always that speculation and conspiracy theory and everything else. So this basically allows for more transparency of that party staying home, because it brings home the issue that you got to nominate your candidates and move your candidates forward. And so this allows also for that, you know, equal protection under the law, for that party to be able to say, I have to garner those requisite numbers in a primary election in my race, in my party race. And that's very simple in terms of the amendment, Mr. Chair, and I ask this body to consider favorably this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can we get a copy, please, for the clerks on the amendment? On the amendment, Senator Tom Etta.
So if the mover of the amendment would yield, does he then envision having basically 3 separate sets of ballots? One that has all Republicans, another set of ballots that's all Democrats, and then whatever else is left, I guess the independents.
No, Mr. Chair.
Wait a minute. Sir. And then I then have to come up and declare my party affiliation. Is that what's intended?
Senator, you?
Absolutely not, Mr. Chair. The only intention here is for the purpose of the calculation. So when the votes are completely cast, and just as we went through the exercise yesterday, where we talked about what votes were cast and who received those votes, in the primary election, I'll give you a scenario. If there's 15,000 votes in the Democrat election, and there's 5,000 votes on the Republican in terms of the candidates having received, I need to get 4% of the 5,000 votes, or the 750 as required current statute, whichever is less. So it's just a simple calculation in terms of within my party instead of the votes at large. And there's no change to the ballot and no requirement for this. It's a simple tabulation.
I guess I'm not following, because in the primary, the top 15 in each partisan group will advance to the general.
Yeah, but Mr. Chair, and I'll explain this. Mr. Chair, if you have, okay, so I'll take my scenario a little bit further. If you have 30,000 votes in a Democratic primary and you have 2,000 votes in a Republican primary, if you base that on 32,000 votes, I may not receive the 4%, even if I'm in the top 15 of my Republican Party. So I may not be able to advance to a general on that mathematical calculation. So my point here is, and I've got a formula that I can show the senator, is that in the eventuality that a situation like that existed, I only have to get the 4% or the 750, whichever is less, in my party race. But the ballot stays the same. It's a mathematical calculation.
Okay. Senator Guthertz?
Mr. Chairman, when I look at this, and then I look at this with reference to the independent candidates, they could probably get into the general with just 2 votes. What? No. I'm not sure we need this at all, Mr. Chairman. But that's just my opinion, but...
Thank you, Senator. So that's an objection to the amendment? Yes. Senator Blas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Mr. Chair, and there was discussions that we had over the last 3 days. The primary race is clearly it's a party race. It's the party's ability to be able to provide its nominations. Now, in the primary election, it would only seem commonsensical to be able to that it is the amounts of votes cast in that party's race. It's not the amount of votes cast throughout. What we run into is probably a constitutional challenge or a legal challenge, for that matter, with regards to the influence, the actions of, or the inactions, quite honestly, to be fair, of one party or another to influence the outcome of what a party's nominations are going to look like. And so what this amendment proposes to do is just that. This is a party race. That's clearly, and according to the Election Commission, and as presented by the Counsel for the Election Commission, when I asked that question, that primary race is a party race. And it was just, you know, that initially, before, this was something that was conducted by the parties at the convention level. It has now evolved into something that is now a government action, but the government still is, it still is a party race. It's the top 50 in the case of the legislative race. It's the top 15 people of that party. You know, how can we say that this doesn't make, when there's always that issue with regards to crossovers? Again, that brings back my concern with a previously passed amendment. Is that we have the concern in the primary about the crossovers, because you can't vote for 15 people. You have to vote down party lines. So therefore, if you have to vote down party lines, then you should only count what's in that party's site to be able to have. Okay. So, and granted, this may have been, you know, the laws as it stood for many years. But this gives us the opportunity in this session, while we're discussing this thing, to be able to correct some of those what I perceive to be deficiencies in the law. You cannot say that it's the totality of the votes that will determine how what a party's makeup of the candidates are going to be. And that seemingly was the concern with a lot of times in a lot of elections, is that if there's not a race, then people have a tendency to move over to the other party side because there is a race and then determine it from there. So that's why, and I support this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Vice Speaker, you recognize?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I kind of like this amendment, and I'm trying to figure out how we can convince our colleagues that this is okay. Because it says no person shall be deemed nominated in primary election unless the candidate receives votes of at least 3 times greater than the required number of signatures needed for the nomination petition for candidacy for such election, or votes equal to 4% of the total number of persons to obtain ballots to vote in that candidate's primary election, whichever is less. So it's 250. So in order to be able to get to the general, you need the 750, either 3 times, either the 750 or 4% of that number. It makes it at least equal, because if I heard correctly what was said yesterday, the 15th candidate on the Republican side in the primary only garnered 3,500. The 15th candidate on the Democratic side garnered over 5,000, almost 5,600. And so, in order to be able to say that both sides are working on the same kind of requirement, I don't see that this thing is onerous or objectionable, and I stand in support. No, it's either you either should at least get 750, or you get 4% of the total number that voted in your party. If only 3,000 people voted in the Republican Party, then 120 votes will do it. 4% of the 3,000 that voted in the Republican primary. No, that it is the votes. It's the votes. 4% of the votes. This is in the primary. This is. If he's in the nominated party. If in a regular party. But the same thing. Why should a Republican have made it into the general election when they had 2,000 votes less than some of us did?
Yeah. Vice Speaker, we'll take a short recess. Was that? Okay, can we call them in now before we go on in? Thank you. The Committee of the Whole is now back on. On the Dueñas Amendment, there's been an objection. So I'd like to call all those in favor of Senator Dueñas' amendment? Motion fails. Okay, we don't have any other amendments before us now. However, there are some others that are being prepared, right? Okay. So while we wait for that, Senator Blas?
Mr. Chair, I think that actually the amendment is technical in nature. Yesterday was the whole discussion with regards to the movement of the primary election from the first Saturday in September to the last Saturday in August. That's basically 1 week. So recognizing that, there's a whole process to prepare for the primary that I believe needs to be moved back this corresponding amount of time with regards to the filing of packets and whatnot. So I believe that this is technical in nature, or is it technical in nature that because we moved the primary back 1 week, that we moved all the other dates commensurate to the primary back 1 week as well. Madam Executive Director, you have...
Senator, we have to go through it. There may be some, there may not. We'd have to go through this statute to see where.
I think one of the areas is with regards to more glaringly is the date necessary for the packets, right? Because moving it back 1 day and keeping it where it's at, it doesn't fit the 90-day requirement.
That's correct.
It's now 83 days. So we've to stay in tune with the 90-day requirement.
That's correct, Senator.
Okay. So
And the last day to file will change.
okay, but now I'm just thinking, is it necessary because we do say 90 days prior to the primary, right? So it's just a matter now of your office now sending out the notices properly, saying that because of the change, instead of now July, it is now June, right?
Yes, sir. And if the change is enacted, we have contact information for everyone that has picked up a packet, and they will be notified, as well as media releases will be issued.
Okay, so then the question is if the language already states it's 90 days from, there's no date specific, right? In other words, it doesn't say like the second Tuesday of any month, it's 90 days. We just want to make sure that that's covered. Okay? So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Vice Speaker, on your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one amendment. I really am bothered with this purging of the listing and not getting notification. So I proposed an amendment where 30 days before the names are going to be purged, that it has to be published. I think all of you understand that. I mean, you know, when we do the tax rolls that are on the paper, or the deadbeat parent listing, I mean, the phones go crazy. You know, Maria Hoffa, your name's on the list, then you owe taxes, and so if it's published somewhere, because not everybody has an iPad or a computer, if it's published, at least people will start calling and saying, how come your name is on the list? And that's my amendment, plain and simple, Mr. Chairman. I know it's going to cost money, and I'm sure that we'll be hit with a bill from the Election Commission, but that amount of money that is going to be spent for the publication is worth making sure that people are not turned away at the polls and their votes not being counted or them being denied the right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Speaker.
Just a question to the Vice Speaker. When you say publish, is it going to be in a paper of general circulation?
Apologize, then I'll amend my amendment to say published in a newspaper of general circulation.
The other thing is right where it says by mail its intention. Maybe we can use that publish being the intention or notification. And then after it's published, then we mail them their cancellation.
Well, it's, by law, you're supposed to send them notification, right?
Right.
So at the same time that you send out the notification, you put the list together, you publish the list of all the names that you're planning on publishing, that you sent out letters to. So just in case they had moved, and that's the reason, they'll be able to know that their name's on that list. And though there may be 6 Benjamin Cruzes, I can at least go down and say, hey, and they'll say, no, this one is only 24 years old. It's not an old man. So that's not you that's being canceled. Right?
Because I know one of the challenges we will probably have is there are a lot of Jose Cruzes. And if we just put that name, we can put their voting precinct, but we would not want to put their date of birth or anything else.
Right. But at least they would know that from that precinct, and if they come down, like I said,
Right.
if I come running down and saying, why are you taking my name off the voter registration list, you can tell me, don't you wish you were only 24 years old? You're getting closer to 64. This is not you.
But I thought you were 24.
Oh, I wish. So I'm trying to figure out some way that there's notification, and I know that when those deadbeat lists come out and the tax rolls come out, I'm calling all my relatives and going, how come we're listed here as owing taxes? And it gets cleared up fairly quickly. And if somebody can think of some other way, I just want to make sure that we don't start excluding people, like the speaker spoke about of 10,600 people being purged. We've got to do something to make sure that we don't, whether or not it's 1,000 or 10,000, whatever, we've got to make sure that people aren't denied that right.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Any, Senator Respicio?
Thank you very much, Ms. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the Vice Speaker raises an amendment which I certainly support, but I guess it's an opportunity for me to bring up an earlier discussion we had with the manner in which the voter listings are being purged. Now, there's an article in the paper today, and I'd like to engage very respectfully and politely with the Executive Director of the Guam Election Commission. There was an article in the Pt.1, Mr. Chairman, that I took the position, as well as other members here, that if notices weren't sent prior to being purged from the voter listing, then those voters were illegally purged from the voter listing. There's a federal statute that requires that. Ms. Pangilinan, I hope you were misquoted, ma'am, but you said that no voters were illegally purged from the voter listing.
Senator Rory Respicio, thank you. Yesterday, sitting in the public hearing room, the reporter asked me about the purging for 2010, and so those voters were notified from those that were purged after the 2010 election. And that's what I had told them.
Yeah, but that's not how the article came out. What I was saying, really, and we understand each other, and I gave you a letter, and you're very well aware of the federal law that requires a notice prior to being sent out. And then if you read the article, of course, you consider the source, right? Not you being the source. No, consider the medium. Sorry, consider the medium. Yeah, consider that media outlet where we take a position. that this shouldn't have been done. Thousands of voters may have been disenfranchised. Because the reason why, Mr. Chairman, I bring this up is because I was very concerned when I read that about 6:15 this morning, that if the Guam Election Commission took the position that no voter was illegally purged, then the amendment that we adopted, which requires you to verify first if any voters who are on the provisional ballot category, if any of those voters were illegally purged or not legally purged, same thing, then you would have to count those provisional ballots just to determine whether or not the outcome will still be the same. So, you know, I want to give you an opportunity, an uninterrupted opportunity.
Point of order, please. And I appreciate and I understand and I recognize but I think that the matter at hand is there's an amendment.
And I believe that the amendment, it deals with what his
No, it doesn't.
the issue is bringing up.
Yes, it does. Yeah, the amendment is to.
Yes. You may proceed, Senator Respicio.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you
I
very
want to
much.
get. Yeah. I want to and thank the minority leader for making sure that we're staying on point and being orderly, and we are on both instances. So can you state for the record, at least the public, uninterrupted record, that your comments that were found in the Pacific Daily News were taken out of context, and that when you said that no voters were illegally purged, you were referring to after you assumed your position as the executive director of the Guam Election Commission?
That's correct, sir. In 2011, when I came on board, April 2011, after they were purged, or in the process of purging, based on the mandate, the voters were notified, those that were on the purge list.
And Ms. Pangilinan, was this the voters that were purged after the 2010 election?
That's correct, sir.
So those that were purged prior to the 2010 election, they weren't notified?
I was not there,
Yeah.
sir, and we were looking into it.
Yeah, but I think there was the discussion that they were not notified because you were the first one to make that a practice.
Sir, we were looking into it. Every night we debrief with the staff, and they're looking into that to see if the notifications actually went out. I think we can go back as 2008 and 2006.
And again, for the record, it's, Mr. Chairman, reason why they would cause this list to be published, so I want to be speaking to the amendment, is that if the voter misses 2 consecutive general elections, so you had Patty Arroyo on the radio saying, I believe it's a primary in another election. You know, and so if we can't have members of the media hold themselves to some kind of standard to at least tell the truth and report the facts, then how do we expect the voters to know what's going on? So I stand in full support of this amendment.
Thank you, Speaker Pangilinan, and then Senator Palacios.
Yes, point of it, you know, I just want to say, at least for this round of purging, as called for in the statute, that I saw my brother last year. I visited with him. I asked him if he voted for me absentee. He said, yes, we did. And then he got his letter. So now I went back and I said, did you vote for me? He goes, no, not really. So I want you to know that you purged my brother. He's a Pangilinan too. But you purged him, and he did fail to vote in 2 general elections. I just want to confirm that at least for this 2011, in his particular case, it was done pursuant to what has been called for. And he got 2 letters.
Thank you, Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's an observation. You know, when you read the first 2 sentences, it says here, within 90 days of the certification of the returns of any general election or round of the commission shall cancel the registration of any person who failed to vote in the general election, and we assume that who failed to vote in that general election. But then the second says, prior to the cancellation of registration for any voter who has failed to vote in 2 consecutive general elections. So when does the purging occur? I'm just pointing that out. See the first sentence contradicts the second sentence.
No, so, yeah.
Senator Palacios there, they're going. You ready to? Okay. We'll take a brief recess. Okay, the committee of the whole is now back on. Senator Palacios, is that the floor? You're fine? Okay. On the Cruz amendment, are there any other discussions? There's no objection. Senator Barnes, you reckon?
No, I have no objections to the motion. I just wanted to ask the commission members, based on those that are within the military personnel that are deployed, and there have been a couple that they've been purged because they didn't vote in the last election. Isn't there something under the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act that says that when they're deployed or when they're out, that you can't you can't, you got to give them the same rights, and those absentee ballots go out? Because there were a couple, I know one personally that had to re-register, but he was out on deployment. Just thought I'd ask.
What was the question?
I know of several military personnel they were taken off the list from voting because they didn't vote but I thought there was a protection under, whether it be the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act or another provision within the federal standards that says that if they're deployed or away, that, that they are protected from not being taken out of that registry, as in everything else.
You could be correct, Senator. I'm not aware of that. We'd have to research that.
Food for thought, I think it should be researched and looked at, because some of them who were in the Middle East could not vote, or when their ballots were finally given to them, it was like several weeks after the election. And then they were taken off the list. Thank you. But I do support the amendment, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure that I brought that up, because that too was a problem that had come to our attention.
Okay, thank you.
I do know that the military goes to great lengths to ensure that every opportunity is given to the soldiers to vote. In fact, I think there is what you call a voting officer that's assigned to all the different companies or squadrons, but they go to very great lengths to ensure that they're given the opportunity to vote. But we'll check that out. Okay.
Thank you. On the Cruz amendment, there's no objection. Motion passes. Speaker Ben? Do you want to do it now, or you want to come back? Because I think there's a presentation. Okay, we'll be on recess till 2 p.m. Yeah, I don't know, because they...